Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Yes. Welcome back to Roots of Resilience, where we cultivate ethical leadership grounded in clarity, courage, and emotional intelligence. Even when the landscape feels unpredictable, chaotic, or downright exhausting, I'm your host, Dr. Taranda Knight. I'm a doctor of behavioral health. Yes, I'm an unlicensed professional. I do not care to provide therapy or diagnose or treatment planning. Now, I am a coaching consultant, so go ahead and like, share, follow. And today's episode is actually the final one of my series podcast room that I have for Roots of Resilience just to get started for the new year 2026. So, thank you all for those that have been engaging and following me across social media platforms. So, today we're choosing the season with pretty much a great level of powerful truth. Okay, learning doesn't happen in isolation. Well, isolation, and it helps in a climate, and climate is shaped by leadership. Now, today we're talking about trauma informed leadership in higher education. Now, I know when you guys hear trauma informed, there are many things that comes to mind. I get it. What it actually means is what the evidence says and how campuses can start with new habits and not new committees, or definitely not new 300-page PDFs nobody wants to read, right? Maybe me. But this episode is for anyone that's a president, a provost, dean, faculty, staff, student affairs team member, or anyone trying to keep a campus health when stress, pressure, and crisis feel like they're on the syllabus. And yes, I would add a little humor today. So if you are someone that's sensitive to humor, this may not be the episode for you. But go ahead and like and subscribe. And once again, thank you guys for following me and giving me support. And remember that I give these laughs because if we can't laugh, we can't lead. And let's get into it. When we look at why leadership must adapt, here's the big headline. From integrative reviews and leadership scholarship, trauma informed practice is no longer optional. It's a leadership, um, kind of like a pedagogy, and higher education is behind. So we're looking at behind K through 12, behind healthcare, behind social services. So scholars argue, and this is consistent across multiple integrative reviews, that trauma informed approaches should be embedded in the leadership development, not treated as an odd factor or an add on or wellness perk. Why? Why is important? And it's happening because college students have some of the highest trauma exposure rates recorded in any educational setting. The next one is national data sets show escalating anxiety, depression, and suicidality. And the final one is post pandemic academic environments are more complex, more stressed, and more emotionally demanding. And here's the kicker, many academic success programs already mirror trauma informed principles, but don't know how they're actually doing it. When we look at scope and review, some programs reflect on SAMHSA's principles, and that's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, which includes safety, trust and transparency, peer support, collaboration and neutrality, empowerment, voice, and choice. And I have to smile with that one because We just had Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday come up, and we know him to be the greatest civil rights activist ever. But if we look through time at those that have been really great advocates, they died at, or they were unalived at such a young age for advocating for empowerment, for voice, and for choice to help humanity. Well, from a young age, I chose to help humanity by loving and supporting and being there for people, not just in health aspects, but also in social aspects. Even when, as an introvert, I didn't care to, but I learned I did have a superpower, and that superpower was that when I'm around people, like truly genuine good people that can see you for who you are, they open up. Even those that could be like boggled down with an extreme amount of stress, even substance use. I've had some of the most intoxicating patients over the years. They still put their trust in me to talk to me, to look at me as someone that had the knowledge and resources, not just to listen, but to help guide them to where they needed to be. We are attacked so often, and I hate to say culturally or racially associated factors, but sometimes research tries to give us the evidence, right, that African American individuals do have it much harder than other ethnicities. And I get it. We cannot change our skin color. We can shape and change and remodel who we are as individuals. But beyond that, even with trying to attempt to change who you are, you still have a basis like of who you are. So if you are someone that's trying to be social or trying to appear to want to help human beings and their lives improve, most of the time you're causing more trauma than you are helping. And that's mostly because you're not identifying with your own bias and judgment. It's sort of like you may have that ability to listen, but at the end of the day, you mistreat them in some way, whether making their treatment harder or their outreach to particular services and processes harder. And those are the things that impact society, whether it be the unlived by individuals in society or those that are unlived by them making a choice to do it to themselves. Either way, one life loss is one too many. And the final one is cultural, historical, and gender responsiveness. When we look across campuses across the US and outside of the US, there are a lot of ways in which we are intentional with our abilities to identify trauma and address it. But let's take a look because campuses rarely name their principles, and leaders tend to miss intentionality, measurement, scalability, and opportunities to align across departments. And it is an act of Congress to even get in the door in places because, hey, I get it. No one wants to acknowledge that there's even a problem. Where you could be willing to acknowledge all your faults and issues. Like I could sit here and tell you all my faults and issues, exactly who I am. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't make a difference unless by doing that, I'm helping someone else identify who they are and identify with whom they are, right? I can tell you about all the traumas I've experienced throughout life. And if you don't have compassion and empathy, my words mean nothing. And if you don't have compassion and empathy, you take every word I say and try to use it to be weaponized against me in some way. And that is the reason many people don't seek help. So we're truly about people, we should be working with them. If we're not, we need to go work with things that are maybe not associated with people, like making objects that can help improve people's lives, or creating some process or flow that doesn't include people. Maybe robotics, things that is a little less emotional, and the sense of trauma isn't internalized the same, because we need human beings, right? That's what research shows. But research also shows us how trauma can cause work accidents on campuses or in any industry, not strategically. Leadership research also tells us something, that empathy and adaptability are no longer soft skills, they are strategic capabilities. In post pandemic, leaders who thrive are those who respond with emotional intelligence, integrate student well being into decision making, and manage organizational trauma with clarity, not avoidance. Now, some people take me to be arrogant, or take me to take everything for a joke sometimes. And it's mostly because some of the things I say make them think about things, but I make it sound pretty funny, right? And here's why. Because in a world where we could be the largest system, even they don't want to acknowledge they need help, and they'll say, "Oh, we already have that service. We don't need any. We don't need that service." Well, if that service you have works like it should and functions like it's supposed to, wouldn't it reduce the amount of occurrences that we see? And sometimes it takes one little small thing, just acknowledging that maybe a little bit more support may be needed, maybe a different view, a different vision around the goals, maybe around the mission and vision. But here's something, when looking at those things, because avoiding trauma never makes it disappear, it just makes it expensive later. And that's the thing that I had to realize personally. I got into my field to learn about the mindset around people and the things they do, while they do them, and how they do them, and how our body, well, basically our brain, processes those things, right? Now, when you're taught in school, you have the ability to read the whole book. Your teacher or your professor may teach it from a standpoint that only highlights certain particular things throughout the chapters. But I chose to talk about everything because I wanted my students in psychology to be able to know about things and think about things differently, but also know what they have accessibility to when it comes to what's in the world, right? Maybe around trying to shape or mold that specialty of what their background they wanted it to be when they graduated. The other part many people miss is, even for myself, even though I got in it to understand other people, I also got in it to understand myself and those that I love, right? But sometimes you get so caught up in helping other people, you do neglect the family or those you love a little bit, not in the sense of neglecting them in the things they need, but neglecting them in the sense of identifying with them emotionally. I can say with my kids, I'm pretty good at that. Mostly, parenting just requires you to understand that kids are given to us. And they are their own individual, regardless of who you are. They can shape and mold themselves in whom and whatever they want to be. And that's not a reflection of you. You could be the parent that teaches them everything, but they still make a conscious choice to make other decisions, because they are their own human being, and they shape and mold their personalities and who they are around how they see their experiences. And it may not be your reality, but it's their reality. Now, when we're looking at factors like this in education and the mindset around psychology and trauma, your child may have never experienced any form of trauma, to be honest with you, but they may internalize other things. And from that, it shapes and molds them into who they want to become as human beings, right? Spam callers all the time. I am trying to understand that, but excuse me. When we're looking at these factors, though, and we're making connections to education, whether it be education in elementary school, high school, whether it is um, in all different types of spaces, right? We see it as the capability of addressing trauma. Now, you just heard that phone ring, right? It's not even my phone, it's my child's phone, and she is 9 years old. So the amount of energy people place into, I guess, scamming people, because it says scam, likely when the call came in, it just really makes you think about the forms of trauma people have to experience every day and how it impacts their ability to think and function. Now, some people wouldn't be able to come back to what they're doing like I just did. Some people would struggle with that. Some probably would have shut the whole live down because they just so over it and it's already been through so much and they're just tired and frustrated with it. But I want you to think about this. Here's some principles in practice. Let's break down Sampson's 6 principles that's real to higher education examples. But when we think about it, we can truly create things that is interchangeable to many aspects of our life. I remember thinking to myself, how is math relevant to what I'm going to school for? But it was because we wasn't taught finances and budgeting and all those type things, right? But that's really what it's for. But also everything in the world is calculated, even all the way down to your worth as an individual. I bet you didn't know that. That is why we have so many advocates like myself trying to teach people you are worthy. You have to know your worth and stick to that and shape and mold your life around it and not allow people to take you off that path because of their own biases, judgments, and discriminations. It's okay. That's the world in which we live in. But here are some principles that Samsa gives to us that is truly relevant to that of higher education. Safety is the first one. Predictable routines, consistent communication, clear office hours, classrooms where students know what to expect, unpredictability, and a trauma trigger. Predictability is a leadership strategy. Safety is something that is most important, or at least should be the most important, to any higher education institution bringing in your loved ones, if this is a family watching. And if it's a professional, know that the income you make comes from those students and their families in some way, fashion, or form. Because the grants and the scholarships comes from taxpayer dollars. And most of the time, even the partnership money that is obtained comes from some organization that has received funding through grants or scholarships. So it's like a recycling of the system to make a connection with each other. But here's the second thing: trust and transparency. Transparency, grading policies, clear pathways for academic support, honest communication during campus crisis. Trust isn't built through statements, it's built through structure. But we see so many times organizations have a really good, as they say, talk game. But when it comes down to really showing that they care, Their policies and procedures and structural basis does not reflect that completely. There are a lot of gray areas. There are a lot of areas that it's just so boldly stating we don't care about this, that it does impact trust. But because it's something that they feel society needs, people feel pressured to go through the process of it regardless of. Let's take a look at the next one, which is peer support. Near peer mentors, ambassadors, and trained student leaders reduce stigma and create belonging. Students believe students because they know their experiences, right? I am what they call a lifelong learner, but I've also been a student for many, many years across my life, mostly because of a lot of the trauma experiences that I had to endure. Did I give up? No. And hopefully that's the encouragement to someone out there, whether you're in leadership, whether you're a student, whether you're a family member or a friend. But now let's take a look at the next one, collaboration and mutuality. Co-designed success plans, advisory boards with student voice, and cross-departmental partnerships keep students from falling into bureaucratic black holes. And when it comes to the next one, empowerment, voice, and choice, optionality and demonstrating learning, presentations, papers, multimedia formats allow students to show mastery without unnecessary distress. And the next one that Samsha talks about is cultural, historical, and gender responsiveness. This is not diversity work. You know, when people look at who I am and what I do, it automatically triggers DEI because of my African American female with my hair natural. Not even thinking about the fact that maybe she had health conditions and that's why her hair is that way. Or maybe she just decided to go natural because she's tired of the chemicals. Those are never the original things that comes to people's minds when they are biased, judgmental, and have discrimination. And when they're that way, they assume you're that way. And they use it to create these narratives that are so unrealistic. And you have to know me to know that my family dynamic, family history is just so mixed up. I cannot discriminate against anyone. It would just not make any sense at all. But I have to say that once I have experienced life and been around people, I can see how people can assume that thought process could be created regardless of what your family dynamic looks like, because families can be attacked and their relationships with you can change as a result of people instilling fear and trauma in their lives. But this is trauma work, acknowledging how identity impacts harm, heal, and help seeking. And understanding and knowing that your students come from all various different cultural and historical and gender related backgrounds. You as leaders also do. And leadership also experiences trauma that can be projected off in those decision making practices that are important to the success of the students, the faculty, staff, and those that have to be around you. Leadership behaviors emphasize across the literature that includes authenticity, emotional intelligence, relational capacity, and resilience. These aren't personality traits, they are competency skills that turn principles into culture. I saw a post on LinkedIn and it noted that people put a lot of time and energy in trying to change people that don't want to be changed, but or trying to impact or get leadership to change when they don't want to change. But isn't that what advocacy is about? And many people will try to discourage you by saying, oh, you're just wasting your time and your energy doing that. You could be doing something so much more constructive. Well, if someone doesn't do it, then how does it change? And if things doesn't change, then how do I have this microphone? How do I have this computer or internet or Wi-Fi or even clothing that looks different and is not all the same? Because someone saw the value in changing and doing things different and introducing new innovative ideas into the process. So it's unrealistic to say you're wasting your time trying to get people to change. We have a whole field designed by the government to help people with navigating their lives. They have to change in order for something to change. A substance abuser has to identify the core problems and issues to change. And so do you as a leader, identifying the core problems so that you can change. Because just like a substance abuse individual or mental health illness patient, the behaviors that come with those related factors impact those that are around you. Has what I like to call the domino effect. And yes, you can teach them, you can operationalize them, you can measure them, you can hold them or hold your teams accountable for them. But remember this, these aren't personality traits. They're competency skills that turn principles into culture. People are so afraid of doing something that's useful and helpful and feeling it's changing who they are or creating an image of weakness. Well, if someone didn't create an image of weakness, you would have never got hired. If that's the case, if we see those things as weakness instead of just a process, because hiring you is a process. It's not a weakness of the people that decide to hire you. It's a process. So to see evaluating things and changing things as a weakness really makes you question the reasoning behind, do you trust? Do you have issues with accountability? Or do you have factors that are impacting you in your life currently that is shaping and molding your decision making or impacting your trust? That's something to think about. But here, let's look at measure what matters, right? What if leaders don't measure well being? They can't improve it. If you're not measuring something and looking at it, observing it, then how do you improve it? You don't even know anything about it for as how well it works or what might needs to change. And that's where quality services like mine come from, that want to look at data and see how we can bring change. National data sets repeatedly show rise in anxiety, rise in depression, increase in suicidality, or worsening loneliness among college students, or loneliness across many people. Personally, loneliness doesn't bother me. Once you learn the aspects of the world and psychology, you tend to think about things in different ways. It doesn't mean you don't have the same thoughts and experiences, but you think about it differently so it doesn't impact you the same. And here's a leadership insight. Mental health impairment is now one of the top barriers to academic success. So it's not lack of motivation, it's not poor studying habits, it's not the mysterious kids these days. Mental health. So leaders must treat well-being as academic infrastructure, not as a side office in a basement nobody visits. Multi-campus data is clear. And it's clear because students with self-injury or suicidality histories improve during structural counseling care. Case management reduces crisis escalation, and campus counseling centers produce measurable academic stability. But you want to know the one that's the most important? Having accessibility to information about resources your campuses offer and what it includes. Now, I can say when I did my research during my doctoral program, I found that out of the 44 total colleges and universities I was able to reach out to. When I review their websites, because most of them never answer the phone, probably got through to a little bit to a half of them. But those that I reviewed everybody's website, they had a website, I reviewed it. I wanted to know what information was shared to the students about the core factors important to their success in higher education. And that is Office of Disability, having a counseling or some form of care based service, whether on campus or not, and having the knowledge and information around how to reach it. And then the other one was, did they have health care? Did they have physicians or nurse practitioners they could see if they had medical conditions that arose that was accessible to them on campus? And what I found during that time was zero. Okay, zero. Now, this was 2022 uh, that I completed my research, but it started at the end of 2021. Yeah, it took me that long. It's okay. That's a long story in itself. It's like my sickness motivation. But here's what I have to say. To go from zero, and this is 2026, this is what, 3 years later, we're going to say 3 years later, because I'm going to take it to the latter end of my research. So 3 years later, we have college campuses that have improved now. I haven't researched whether they were the ones to receive some of the funding that Biden had for behavioral health services. But I can say that I am able to review more college campus information and find that they do have more information out there for the students. The question though is, are the students aware? Do they even know what terms to search for the campus to find what it is they need? Those are the important questions. And here's some additional ones. Why do campuses under-resource the one unit that improves retention? And here's what research says. Often it's because of tradition, misunderstanding, or lack of leadership training in trauma-informed systems. It is made to be stigmatized. It is made to be seen as a negative. It's sort of like individuals see students that failed as failures and they will never be able to accomplish anything or do as they need to in life, instead of seeing it as, they've learned a lot if they've went through that experience, and they just need someone to help them shape and mold that into what they can do with it. So many people look at me and say, oh, she's not licensed. How will she survive? Well, if just being licensed was all this degree was about, then degrees should never existed. I should have never been able to obtain it without that completion of it, right? And so the biggest thing I think that we have to realize in society is, to make things more valuable for individuals, we have to look at all aspects of use. And to say that we need something in the field, when in actuality we have enough people in particular fields that we really don't need professionals or providers in, we just need to use the ones we have, says a lot, right? So it teaches us about economics, and that's something I read about, okay? Because it's important to understand how the world around you revolves and works. And so when we look at why do campuses under-resource the one unit that improves attention, and we find that it's because of tradition, misunderstanding, lack of leadership training, and trauma-informed systems, this is why leadership, not counseling offices, must architect the climate. So yes, when I decided to create my services, yes, I went totally to those that are in leadership and not to those that are in behavioral health and just healthcare. Because what I've learned in my whole world of working in whatever setting I was in is that it's the leadership that changes the policies and procedures. And they are the ones that set into play the things that makes the greatest change. It's not the employees doing the work every day, but they need the support. They need the leadership to see where their struggles are and be willing to acclimate to that, right? It's sort of like when we look outside. The weather makes the trees and the flowers and the grass all acclimate to climate change, right? And it works all together. It's not a one size fit all type of thing, and this is just what we're going to do for everything. So even the things in nature around us teaches us that these things are possible. We just have to identify why it isn't happening or why it's not working. So let's take a reflection. And first three moves. Let's look at them. Here are the first three moves if you want a trauma informed campus culture that works. Okay. Now, I know you hear that all the time. I'm not one to make promises, I'm just one to bring what the research says. But when we're looking at these things, they're all impacted by human beings. And human beings are emotional, human beings are biased, human beings are judgmental, human beings are discriminatory. And all those things impact whether people see the usefulness of it, whether they actually use it when they pay for it. We pay for many things in this world that never get used. Money spent, money gone. So, sometimes when I hear organization use money as a reason to not invest in something, it's a red flag to me. And here's why. Because you can invest in something just to, if you're unsure, you don't trust it, just invest in something. Let's just see how it may go. But most of the time when those red flags are flaring, you have to see them for what they are, because they may invest in a small part but then manipulate it to their level of discretion. And that's just how the world works, and it's understandable, and we have to understand that, but it doesn't make it right, and it doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Here are three moves. The first one is establish a termly well-being dashboard. And it should include distress indicators, help seeking rates, and belonging metrics. Okay. The final thing for this first one is continuation or retention signals. Share it with deans and faculty councils, not just student affairs. Okay. I intentionally, at the end of last year, sought out student affairs because I've been trying numerous times to get organizations, higher education, and things like that to just have dialect with me, okay, or explore what my services are, come across my page, okay. But I realized that either people are not searching for it because they are afraid of being targeted, which now that rings like a red bell, just ding, 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 ding. And they're afraid because they, are afraid that if they identify these things, then people are going to use it against them. And I see plenty of social media posts that basically supports the theory. I haven't looked up the research on that, but I'm pretty sure I can find some. But the second thing is standardized trauma-sensitive syllabus elements. We're looking at the syllabus across every department include clear grading transparency, predictable timelines, so kind of like what if timelines. What if we have snow? Or what if there's a weather change and we're not able to come to school? The what if, predictable, the unpredictable factors we can place there, but the predictable ones, like knowing that we have this schedule of 8 weeks, we're going to meet every Thursday from 6 to 10, blah, 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 blah. This is what we're going to do. But also make sure crisis resources are put there. Communication expectations, and flexibility pathways, because every student needs to know what their flexibility options are. Is there a possibility I can retake this exam if I'm not able to be here or I'm going through a crisis? They should know that firsthand. I get it. We are so afraid people are going to be manipulative or that people are going to misuse something or whatever. Our whole system does it in some way, fashion, or form. And at this point, if we haven't identified that as a society, I think we can probably be right that it is exceptionally hard to get people to see where change is needed and helping them get there. But clarity reduces harm, and structure creates safety. And that's for another podcast presentation because I can go on a rant about that too. The third thing is offer 3 30-minute micro trainings on the six principles. Short, practical, repeatable, collect belonging feedback from students 6 weeks later. And small habits scale culture faster than new offices or task force. Now, I am praying that each of you are able to get something helpful and useful from today's podcast. I know I kind of went off script a little bit, but humanality in any process means that we have compassion and empathy. It means that we are listening. We want to listen and we want to help. And what better way is there to be, regardless of how the world may attempt to paint you, right? Being strong in who you are and knowing where you belong, regardless of how other people feel. Because most of the time, when people are trying to run your way, it's a real issue there. And they need real support and help. And most of the time, when people feel like things don't work and they tried it, it's because you didn't have the right people. And now you're trusting that it's going to be that way with everyone, which means you may need therapy. It means you may need to talk to someone and process those feelings and emotional and determine if they're rational or irrational. Most of the time, it is rational to your experience, but it's irrational to project it off on everything and everyone. And remember, leadership is not about controlling the climate, it's about cultivating it. And students don't thrive by accident, they thrive because leaders choose to protect learning. Okay, so 4 ethical leadership practices grounded in evidence. Make sure you visit my website, www.virtuallyrenownedconsultingaccessllc.org. I am Dr. Taranda Knight. I'm a doctor of behavioral health, and yes, I'm a polymath consultant and coach because I love all intertwined bases of behavioral health. Make sure you follow me at TikTok at Never Feed the Beast and also on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, where you can find me by my business name, Virtually Renowned Consulting. For weekly leadership insights, I'm here for you. But remember, share these hashtags when you are out there advocating. Never feed the beast, hashtag never fed the beast, and hashtag roots of resilience, because these are important aspects that are important to the success of our society. And so, thank you. And until next time, be great.